Good evening, guys. Rusty here, and welcome back to Impact Dynamics. Back on Easter Monday. Hope you guys had a wonderful Easter and ate all the chocolate and found the Easter bunny. And yeah, got into it. It's great to be back, and we have an exciting week coming up. There's a few exciting guests coming up. Thursday night, Steve Hurt, who runs and owns and does all the things behind Outer Edge Projectiles. It's very rare to get someone on who actually designs projectiles for a living, so I'm looking forward to that. That's reloading night, Thursday night. Friday, a little special guest is on. You may know him from a particular podcast. That's all I'm allowed to put out at the moment, and some other people through the week. Tonight, Chris Hooper, very excited about joining us, so we'll get on to him in a moment. Projectile Warehouse is sponsoring the show, as you guys probably know by now, but you know there may be some new names dropping in. So jump over to the website projectilewarehouse.com.au, and we are seeing the code ID Live 5 come through on a few orders, which is excellent. ID LIVE number 5, and just added all of the Outer Edge projectiles there, and stock will be coming through of those later in the week. So if you're checking out the Outer Edge stuff, that will be great, particularly on Thursday night when Steve will tell you all about it, which will be exciting. Chuck any questions into the chat on YouTube. That's the place to go. We'll see those comments and stuff. Scott is saying g'day already. Hello, Scott. How you doing? Hope you're well and your Easter is good. We can't put photos up in there. I was going to get everyone to take photos of their big Easter eggs, but anyway, that could be demoralising for me because I don't think I got any. But that's probably for the better. I've got enough. The kids got so much chocolate that I can just eat all theirs, and I'll be fine for a couple of weeks. Very good. All right. So tonight's guest, a little bit different to I guess the guest we have normally, although. He's a shooter, and I've known him for quite a long time. And I'll tell you the story of how we met momentarily. But he is also an accountant, very talented accountant. And I asked him to come on tonight to share a little bit of breakdown of what's going on financially, a little bit about the stimulus stuff that's happening, because there's lots of numbers being thrown about, and we've got no idea. Many of us don't quite know what relates to us or that sort of thing. So if you guys are in the chat and that's of interest, or you've got questions about that, throw that up, and we shall bring him on now. Chris, down the southeast somewhere, are you there, mate?
Hey, Rusty, how are you?
I'm very good. There you are. We found you on the thing. Excellent. How is it down in the southeast of South Australia?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Pretty quiet, which is where you want to be to wait this whole thing out.
Yeah, I bet. What's the feeling like? I know we talked before. You're talking about the tourist side of things, pretty quiet. But what's the general feel?
Look, I think, tourism is down, obviously, which is probably a good thing in the scheme of things. But other than that, I mean, it's kind of business as usual. I mean, we've got a lot of dairy farms around here and a lot of other primary production, and for them, it's still business as usual, thankfully, because, I mean, we still need that produce, and we still need the trucks that deliver it. And I guess, in town, things, I'd probably say maybe half of the businesses here are shut. Those are probably the tourism-aligned businesses, have been shut down. But again, so far as primary production and the logistics supply chain, that has to keep on going. So I think in that respect, yeah, still business as usual.
Yeah, right. And you had only recently moved down there, and
yeah.
I did ask you before, had you joined a gun club yet? Because I know that was part of your plan of getting down there and being able to shoot a little bit more. And then this whole thing happened.
Yeah, so I had this big grand plan, and I didn't want to kind of overwhelm myself with, extracurricular social activities. So, first week here, I signed up with the CFS because that's kind of what you do when you're a young, able-bodied man, of course you do. And then, second thing I did was find and join the local gym. And I'm glad that we had one here at the local footy club.
Yep.
And then the third thing I was going to do, as I was saying to you on the phone maybe a month ago, was that I was going to join the local gun club.
Yeah.
I mean, they were pretty hard to find, because it's, I guess, not like there's banners plastered up around on the main drag or anything like that.
Yep.
But anyway, I found them. I found, the president and the treasurer and stuff like that, and was all sort of set to join up. And then sort of everything just got shut down, all social activities. It was first CFS.
Yep.
I got word from one of the girls there that it's cool, all of our meetings and trainings, they're off now.
Yeah, okay.
And then the second was the gym. got the message from like the gym owner just going like, sorry man, we got to shut down. And then like the gun club had actually closed prior to that. So yeah, I was actually saying to a mate that it's like kind of all of my hobbies, overnight just kind of got put on hold, which kind of sucks. But I guess I'm making the most of it around the house. Just working on this place.
Yeah, do what you can while you can. Now, remember, we met originally. I don't know if you remember the email I sent, but I was looking at starting all of this that we're involved with now, and I was looking for an accountant, and I saw yours on a forum, I reckon, like a solo business forum. Sent you an email and I said, look, here's the business I'm in, and this is what I'm looking at doing. And I'm pretty sure you wrote back with a picture of a target that you'd shot, just saying, I think we can help you out.
Yeah, I've literally just been shooting that weekend, and I think you emailed me on the Monday.
Yeah. And I just went, I think I found the guy. I reckon he might understand what I'm talking about, because many don't.
Good match, and that was a good outing as well. I think I had a pretty tight grouping on there too. I'll have to dig up the photo, but I think that was a good weekend.
Yeah, right. I seem to remember it was an air rifle or a 22 or something you said. Anyway,
no, it was a Savage 22. I remember the one. It was a mate of mine's.
Okay, yeah, cool. And I remember a few years. We used to every year our business still existed. We used to do a little gathering when I had a few more people sort of contracting for me, and so we get together. And I remember you guys came down and blew some clays apart. Was that your first time shooting clays, or have you done that a fair bit?
No. I've done it plenty of times before. I absolutely suck at clays, right? But I don't know if you remember this, but you actually taught my wife to shoot for the very first time.
I remember
that.
So
her first ever shoot, because I've been on her case for years, going, come out with me.
Yeah, and she was nervous about that. I remember that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you sat with her for like 10 minutes or so, I guess giving her like a bit of a pep talk and safety briefing. I think you gave her a different gun as well. I can't remember. I think you called it the lady rifle or something.
It was probably a 410, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon.
Shotgun to start off with.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but it was it probably had a little less kick to it. Talked to her, and then the first clay that you sent up, she nailed, right? And then she just put the gun down going, okay, cool, I'm retiring undefeated. And that was it. She never shot again, but
really?
She's still talking about that.
Oh, maybe there's some still hope. I'll head down there and we'll get out again. Oh,
absolutely.
All good, mate. Excellent. And what type of shootings do you enjoy the most?
Probably, like long distance, like rifle stuff. I very much like, I guess, taking my time.
Yep.
If you know what I mean. And just being able to like, size up a target, get the brief. It's almost like a meditation type thing. And I'm sure plenty of other people have sort of, explained it that way. But I think very much like the process of that in terms of and being able to take my time with the shot as well. And yeah, I think that's probably my favorite. And my least favorite is definitely like clay pigeons. Like I just freak out,
Can't make it work.
I can't make it work, man, because I think that time where my wife nailed the first one she got sent up, I missed 6 in a row. And it's
scarred you.
Cool.
Yeah, okay.
I've just been outdone by my wife. First time out.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Very good, mate. Well, are you able to give us a little bit of an overall picture of some of the financial side of things at the moment? Because the government's got job seeker, and every few days things change, and we could certainly get bogged down in details, and perhaps we can be guided by a few questions from some of the guys.
Look, I think that's probably a good way to handle it too.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, in the scheme of things, it's no surprise that you're sort of like, I guess, like a bit foggy on this stuff, man, because this started as $8 billion worth of stimulus.
Yeah.
And a couple of things were going on. Like literally a week later, it escalated to like $100 billion in stimulus. I'm like,
wow.
How did that happen? And then like a week later, we'd gotten up to like 200 billion. And I'm just kind of sitting here just going like, what's going on, guys? And like the crazy thing was, right, and this is very frustrating for me and the other accountants out there, is that this stuff was announced And then we're getting phone calls, from clients and stuff like that, going like, what does this mean? How do we do it? And it's like, well, just chill. Like,
Yeah.
the legislation hasn't even gone through. We don't even know if it will go through. Like, Labor have to kind of come on board for this as well, for it to actually go through, right? So I think, the incumbent government at the moment was so busy just doing press conferences and saying stuff and making promises, which is not the usual course of business, right? Like,
No.
usually it's kind of announced that we're going to try and put some legislation through. We're going to wait for legislation. It'll get amended and chopped and changed, and then, it'll come through. And that's like a 6 to 12 month process, right? Instead, you've got this press conference where, like, promises are being made. You've got these landing pages being chucked up from the government. And then you've got like this 2 or 3 week lag time from in terms of it actually being legislation. Because I mean, I don't like to sort of speculate on government policy until there's actual legislation in front of me that I can actually, sink my teeth into. So it was very difficult for me to just tell everyone, just like, yo, just chill, like, take a breather, and like, we'll see what's actually in the legislation. Now, fortunately, the legislation actually passed on Thursday, I think it was. So we're getting a bit more clarity around this. The last thing that kind of needs to be hammered out, and that's still a work in progress, is the actual administrative side of things, because on this side, we've got like, okay, cool, this is the law, this is how it works, I guess. The administration, I guess, is more of the, well, what are the actual mechanics? What form do I have to fill in? What field do I have to fill in on my next business activity statement or whatever, to actually make this happen? And that stuff is still kind of like a work in progress. But what I'm telling like clients, I guess, is to just, stay business as usual as much as you can. And I guess just kind of hope that it'll all like work out, because I have heard stories of people trying to do like dodgy stuff, like backdating registrations, or, trying to like pump up numbers on some things and tank numbers on others. And it's like, dude, like, people are going to find out about that. It's not going to end well for you. So like, just keep doing as if none of this had ever been announced. And then if you're eligible, you'll be eligible. If you're not, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Like, and that's something I want to make abundantly clear to everyone like watching, is that like, if you're not eligible, like, no amount of, tweaking or tinkering or backdating or whatever is going to make you eligible. And it's just kind of luck of the draw. And there are winners and losers in these announcements as well, so like, sole proprietors, like, as in, individual, like, non-employers, I guess, businesses, like, they're getting hammered. Freelancers, it's like, tough cookies. And there are people, I guess, winners and losers in this. But I guess that's kind of luck of the draw. They can't kind of factor in every single conceivable scenario here. And they are definitely biased toward employers, and rightfully so, I guess. And that is what it is,
Okay. Yeah, it's certainly challenging times, and I mean, they're clearly they're under the pump, because I got a phone call today from whatever they're called now, Services Australia or something. Who knows what Centrelink's going by this week? And I'm thinking, today's public holiday. Like, and they're making phone calls on us. Anyway, they're clearly
that's weird.
Through. Yeah, I thought it was really strange. But anyway,
so just on that, in terms of Department of Human Services, or AKA Centrelink, like, part of the business stimulus was actually designed to lift the burden of the load off of Centrelink, right? Because I'm sure you guys read about it in the news, that as soon as like the job seeker sort of like payments, it was basically a supplement to the New Start, like, dole, was announced after a whole bunch of people got laid off. Like, you're talking like hundreds of thousands of people got laid off in the space of a week, right? And I don't know how they thought this was going to end, but Centrelink got smashed, right? You saw the photos online with like lineups, which is the funniest thing ever when you're trying to like contain a virus. Lineups, for like 1,000 yards, out the front of Centrelink, and the online services kept crashing all the time, and it was just absolutely nuts, right? So this whole JobKeeper payment, which goes to the employer, was kind of introduced as a way going like, look, if your business has been shut down, we're going to pay you to pay your employees instead of them actually going to Centrelink, right? Because they're not necessarily like unemployed. They've just been like, what the term is furloughed, which is kind of like leave without pay, I guess. And as soon as this all starts back up again, we want them to come back to work for you. So we're going to give them, I guess, or give you, the employer, the money to pay them. And it was really basically just to like ease some of the burden off of Centrelink, right?
Okay, it's pretty pretty violent, because that was what it was about, the job seeker one, and then
that's right.
The job keeper might be a bit more relevant to what I'm doing, and
potentially,
so see how it all pans out. Now I've got a couple of questions that have come through for you, Chris, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So I don't know if you know, but you're probably across this, that a number of states have basically closed gun shops or then rolled that back a little bit just to apply restrictions on sales of firearms and ammo, and as you would know, for gun shops, that's most of it. Right. Anthony's got a question about sort of like, and it's pretty generalised, but with those companies with those restrictions, how long would they have in this current climate, and what can they do to survive?
So I guess being a gun store, right, and being, I guess, compulsorily shut down by the government is, in this context, is actually no different to them shutting down gyms or cafes and restaurants, et cetera, right? So in effect, you're directly impacted by, the coronavirus. And I guess by virtue of that, you can be propped up with, the JobKeeper, payments, and that cash flow boost payment that they're doing through the BAS this quarter and so forth. But I mean, and that's kind of it. So gun shops are basically chucked into the same basket as the gyms and restaurants and all of the other businesses that have been shut down. And beyond things like the JobKeeper payment and that the $20,000 lump sum payment, which I think they're calling the cash flow boost or whatever. And I guess rent relief, which is another one that we should talk about. Other than that's kind of it, But I like to think of this, costs, because what you need to do is like, okay, if you've got no revenue coming in, you need to kill expenses to save your business, right? And I call it the big three. Yeah. So the first one is payroll.
Yep.
You've got to cut off payroll. Now the government is basically paying you the JobKeeper payment so that you can keep payroll alive. Okay, cool. We'll meet in the middle on that one. So the next one you need to think about killing off is rent, okay? And what the federal government have basically mandated now is that your landlord, so if you've got a bricks and mortar gun shop, your landlord basically has to reduce your rent by the same proportion that your revenue has been reduced, right?
Wow, okay.
So let's say that, the state has basically said you can't sell, ammo anymore. Okay, cool. There's 50% of your revenue just like vaporized.
Gone.
Probably more. Then you basically have the ability to go to your landlord if you're leasing a retail shop and go, okay, cool. My revenue's down 50%. I'm reducing my rent by 50%, and the federal government says so, and that's kind of the end of it. And they have to sort of adhere to that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, which is useful in these types of situations.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, the state doesn't want you to fire people, and they don't want you to terminate your lease agreements, right? Because they're saying this is a temporary thing. Yeah, it's going to be back to business as usual. In who knows how long, but theoretically it's supposed to be back to business as usual. And when that happens, we want your employees, to come back, and we want you to sort of, ease into sort of paying normal terms on rent. Now, there's a lot more fine print, obviously, in this rent thing than I can speak about on this without taking up the entire hour. But the idea is that it's a proportionate reduction, relative to your revenue, and then it also kind of tapers or phases back in once we go back to business as usual. So it's not like boom, okay, lockdowns lifted, everyone go back to work. And then boom, you just start paying 100% rent again. It does phase in. So there is a lot of fine print in that, but it is much welcome relief for businesses that have been effectively shut down by the government. And then the last one of the big three. So we talked about payroll, we talked about rent. The last one is purchases or cost of goods sold. Those are your three biggest expenses, and they probably account for 80% of all of your expenses, right? And I guess the thing is, in terms of like guns and ammo, you've already bought, you've already got in stock what you've got in stock. And I guess the reality is, don't buy anymore. And two, I guess you probably can't buy anymore because from what I've been hearing, Rusty, there's a 12-month lead time from the United States in terms of getting ammo into the country. Is that about spot on?
That I don't know. Not in terms of ammo because I don't personally deal with ammo very much. And I'm
But
not
have you heard
sure.
things from mates?
Not in that sort of time frame. Like most of the time frames I've heard are just unknown. Just
Okay.
not
Oh wow, that's probably
just
worse than 12 months.
yeah. So look, it could be better. I'm going to hopefully get from I deal with scoped out. So from an optics side of things, I'm hoping to get some
Yep.
updates on that side of things in the
Yep.
next week because Vortex
Yep.
just announced a really great scope that looks amazing.
Yep.
I'm hoping we see them in like 2 or 3 weeks, which would be normal
Yep.
for them announcing a scope.
Yep.
We'll see. We'll see. So that
I
that
can't imagine like accessories like
mm,
optics and stuff like that being like completely smashed by all of this like prepper buying. But
yeah,
like
okay.
ammunition, man, like
Yep.
has been absolutely decimated. And it's funny, I've been talking to all of my mates both here and in the United States, and they all just laugh and they're like, dude, I already keep like 5G's worth of ammo on hand anyway. Like
Yeah,
I
that's
haven't
that's
had
a
to buy anything.
standard. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is good, right?
Mm.
But talking to gun shop owners and stuff like that, both here and in America, I'm getting this sort of 12-month figure kind of being thrown around because obviously the factories in the States are working sort of double time
Yep.
to
Yep.
sort of
Same here.
to meet demand.
Mm.
But I guess if demand stretched like globally, like, yeah, I guess there is. It's kind of like the toilet paper supply chain, man. In fact, it's no different to the toilet paper supply chain.
Yep.
Um, and we've got the local place, I think Kimberly Clark here in South Australia. They're running 3 shifts, so they're working 24/7.
Yep.
And I don't know what your local supermarket's like, but our shelves are still empty. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Wouldn't
it
know.
goes out as soon as it comes in.
Yep. Yep. People, it becomes a very required item. Supply is up. I mean,
Yeah.
demand is up.
And look, I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, this should come as no surprise to a lot of your audience, and I mean, as a minimum, you should be keeping 3 months of everything, yeah.
Yep.
Be that toilet paper, canned food, or ammunition, like on your person, because like the way the modern supply chain works is like just in time inventory, like the supermarkets are cleared out within 3 days if they're not restocked. And this is actually raises another interesting point. And I keep saying this to friends of mine is that like the trucks in Australia, like we're very dependent on a very, I guess, sensitive supply chain that like a stiff breeze could like knock over. And I think the number one most important thing to actually factor in here, which I guess the federal and state governments haven't been talking about much, is it's like we have to keep the trucks running,
Yep.
and really we have to keep the farms going. The farms seem to be doing okay, right? But it's like the trucks need to keep running. So anything that kind of inhibits or interferes with the supply chain, like at least domestically, like that's a big problem. Like international supply chains are already disrupted. Like
Yes.
people have been talking about trouble getting imports and exports out of the country and imports into the country of any manner of things across a number of different countries. But I mean, our domestic supply chain, food first and foremost, like
Has
that
to
needs
work.
to be secured, like 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Got another question here from APW75. I've heard that people can get 10 grand from Super. What do you know about that? He could
Yes.
do with a new rifle and scope setup.
I like it. Okay, so in order to get like the 10 grand, first you need to be able to demonstrate that you've actually been affected by the coronavirus, right? So you need to have lost your job or lost your primary source of income or what have you. Once you pass that eligibility hurdle, then it's pretty much like fair game in terms of, I guess, getting the cash. And it's usually taxed at a pretty punitive rate if you access your superannuation early. Basically, they're saying tax free, which I think is not necessarily a terrible idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually 10 grand in the 2020 financial year, which we've only got like 3 months left of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's another 10 grand in the 2021 financial year, which is obviously in 4 months' time. So it's 20 grand all up. And yeah, I mean, the number one consideration is if you can get the eligibility, because everyone automatically thinks that they're actually eligible for it. But if you've still got your job and you're still making, the same money you were 2 months ago, you're probably not going to be eligible for it. But if you have actually been adversely affected by this, then you absolutely can. And I think that's to help people make mortgage repayments, to put food on the table and that sort of stuff. And I guess if you want to buy, rifles and related accessories too.
Yeah, there's got to be something said of pulling money out that's probably already tanked a bit in the market.
Oh, mate, the super funds have been absolutely smashed, right? So, yes. Don't get me started on that one.
Okay, no problems. There was a good question here from Ben. Some smaller Australian manufacturers and gunsmiths often seem to struggle even before COVID. From your perspective, what's the biggest mistake businesses often make that hold them back?
Okay.
We're narrow it down to one.
Sorry?
If you had to narrow it down to one? Talking from a Australian manufacturing point of view, so guys who are producing product from raw basically here.
I don't think there's a mistake that's being made here. I think it is kind of like the world / odds are stacked against you, right? In Australia, especially against manufacturing. Because I guess first the intervention in the labor market, right? So minimum wage in Australia is about $20, right? Mm-hmm. In the United States, there's no such thing as a minimum wage, or it might be, but it's like $5 an hour, right? So you've got minimum wages to consider here, right? And that puts you on the back foot. Okay. Another thing that puts you on the back foot is like the health safety, like red tape, right? And this is probably more relevant to comparing Australian manufacturing to Chinese manufacturing, right? Is that, China doesn't have as hardcore, health safety standards as Australia does, right? And health and safety, the welfare of your employees, that costs money. And I think the third one to be acutely aware of, especially right now, is the exchange rate, right? So the Australian dollar is getting absolutely smashed. And I think in some respects, the exchange rate can work in your favor. In other respects, it can work against you, right? So at the moment, with the super high US dollar, American manufactured or produced ammunition is looking really expensive right now, right? And by no influence of your own, suddenly your product is actually much more competitive on a price basis, right? That being said, and this is the big disclaimer, it depends on how much of your supply chain is actually coming from or denominated in American dollars, right? So if 80% of what you produce, right, you may be manufacturing it in Australia, but if 80% of what you produce is in America, right, well, you have to pass those costs on, right? Yep. So if the American dollar is suddenly 50% more, then those costs are going to be factored into your manufacturing, and you're going to have to pass them on to your consumers. But if you've got an entirely domestically sourced supply chain and the American dollar skyrockets, right, then suddenly your product is way more competitive. And I guess the opposite is true. So if the American dollar tanks, suddenly it's much cheaper for me to buy ammunition from the States or buy American brands. I guess that is what it is. So I think in manufacturing, there are a lot of external forces that you can't control that you're kind of battling up against. So I don't necessarily think it's mistakes made on the manufacturer's part. The only thing I can kind of stress in terms of what can you do? What can you control is probably efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where I guess technology and a process called Lean Six Sigma, which is kind of like this manufacturing methodology that was implemented in Japan in sort of the late 60s, early 70s at Toyota predominantly. If you can get Lean Six Sigma going in your factory or your workshop, I think that's an absolute must. Get the technology that exists now to manage that supply chain. I think those are the two things that you can control that will give you a competitive edge.
Yeah, fascinating. One thing that I has been in my mind, Chris, that I love to hear your thoughts on, whether I'm way off the mark or whether it may play out like this. But if Australia recovers relatively well, and gets through this, and let's say we have our closed borders, and we're not trading externally, but we're actually
Yep.
building a fairly solid internal economy, would that cause our dollar to potentially rise?
So I just want to sort of like break that into two parts,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
The probably the best thing that I'm seeing to come out of all of this is that everyone is focusing on their national supply chain, right? There was an article I read over the weekend saying that like Vietnam have stopped exporting rice to Australia. Australia's got very weak domestic rice production.
Okay.
We're not getting imports anymore. Australia could be out of rice this year.
Yeah, right.
And I guess Australia and Australians need to kind of look at, I guess, their consumption and their supply chain and going like, well, and I said to my wife, it's like, well, is that the end of the world? Like, we can eat pasta. Like, we can,
Yeah, true.
can get starch from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like, do we need rice? Do we care? Is it the end of the world that I can't get rice, or that I have to pay like $20 a kilo for rice? And it's like, well, how bad do you want that rice?
Yep.
So a lot of people are thinking about and considering their domestic supply chain. And there's been a lot of talk in the United States about how much of the drug and nutraceutical supply chain of America actually exists in China, right? And we're talking a huge percent, north of 90%.
Wow. Okay.
Like America doesn't make its own aspirin, it doesn't make its own vitamin C, et cetera, right? So it is wholly dependent on a third party to produce its vitamin C, right? Which, that is what it is. But the reason I bring that up is because I had a very interesting conversation last year about steel tariffs, right? So this was maybe a year or two ago when Trump in America introduced steel tariffs, I guess, on all steel imports into America, right? And initially, I guess the libertarian in me was just like, just outraged and just going like, man, tariffs aren't the way to do things. And then Australia got let off the hook for that steel tariff, which I'm like, oh, cool. So Australia's off the hook. Yeah, tax everyone else on their steel, but, let Australian steel flow through to America freely, right? We're all good. Because, steel is a big business in Australia.
Mm.
I guess on one hand, I was thinking about that. On the other hand, I was thinking about how dumb it was that Australia was pulling iron ore and coal out of the ground, shipping those to China, and then buying the steel back from China. Like, that was insane. Like, that is a more economical, way of doing things than actually just making the steel yourself. I just thought was insane, right? Anyway, these tariffs rolled through. Fast forward like 12 months. And then I'm reading that, the United States is now energy independent in terms of oil production. It's a net exporter of oil now, whereas it had always been, dependent on the Arab states for importing oil. And I was talking to a friend and he said, he asked me, he's like, Chris, what are the two main ingredients for war? And I'm like a bit of a war history buff, right? So I knew the answer to that. And he knew I knew the answer. And I said, oil and steel. And it's like, and he's like, exactly. I'm like, oh. And he's like, don't you think it's a bit of a problem that America has to buy or had to buy steel from its number one rival? Because the next question he asked me was like, okay, who is the number one threat to America, right? And I immediately said China, right, economically and diplomatically. And it's like, yeah, so you don't see the problem with America being dependent on China for steel supplies? I'm like, and that's why America ramped up its domestic production and started. And it exempted allies like Australia from this steel tariff because it's like, if it hits the fan, Australia's going to be dependent on America for military support. Yeah. So we'll send as much steel as they want over, right?
Sure.
So I think the good thing to come out of all of this is domestic production, domestic supply chain, and the nationalization of supply chain, I think, is super important.
Yep.
Now, in terms of the impact that has on the dollar, I guess by virtue of that, it doesn't actually matter anymore what the dollar is, right? So if we are, self-contained from a supply chain perspective, right, we don't actually care what, the American dollar or the British pound is trading at because we're digging up our own iron ore, we're digging up our own coal, and we're firing up our own steel furnaces to make our own steel. Like, we don't actually care what's happening outside. And I actually think that's probably a good thing because, we've had this economic collapse from 2008. We've got, version 2 here right now, where it's like, well, maybe it's not a bad thing if we're a little more sort of enclosed from an economic standpoint.
Fascinating. So I mentioned Steve at the top of the show. I mentioned Steve Hurt, who's who runs a projectile company here in Australia, who's going to be on the show on Thursday. He's in the chat and he's saying, pointing out that we actually go through this sort of cycle within the gun industry every 4 years. Now, I don't know if it happens everywhere else, but every 4 years, the presidential election starts looming. And everyone starts over there getting nervous, and we get tighter and tighter on supply for a period of time. On how everything is polling over there, depends on how significant that challenge.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I remember there were massive ammo shortages in the United States back in 2012, was it? And that's probably what he was talking about. But I can imagine that, like, relative to how the polls look, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, would determine sort of like what supply shortages are.
Yes.
And I guess the interesting thing here is that you would have to, I guess, as a manufacturer, you would have to kind of make some bets around what do you think is going to happen? Because, I mean, the thing in manufacturing is if you produce too much, you've got a problem.
Yep.
If you don't produce enough, you've got a problem, right? And a lot of that is actually going to predicate on which way the wind's blowing in the United States. So it's a good point.
Yeah, and so he said that that we basically go through this supply issue every 4 years, but this is a massive multiplier at the moment because
absolutely with the virus as well.
Yeah, we're on this sort of election cycle happening, and now we've got this massive sort of multiplier that is really changing things significantly. So very very interesting to see. Jimmy has a question about AusStudy. And he's on AusStudy. Does that get impacted with any of these additional benefits, or does it just stay as it was?
Okay, so don't quote me on this, right? But my understanding is that AusStudy doesn't change. In fact, most pre-existing Centrelink benefits, be it like the age pension, AusStudy, not New Start, the other one, what's the AusStudy plus youth allowance, all of them kind of like stay at their same rates, business as usual, same with the disability support pension and stuff like that. They all stay at their existing rates, which is obviously annoying a lot of people, the people that were on that before. However, I guess the silver lining here is that there's, I think, 202 times $750 payments that were made to all income support beneficiaries, like prior to the announcement date, right? So if you were on AusStudy prior, you should have had already $750 land in your account. If you hadn't, sit tight, and it'll come. And then another 750 will land, I think in early July, mid-July, sometime around there.
Okay.
But that's pretty much it for people that are on the age pension and AusStudy and that sort of thing, to the best of my knowledge.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, very good. Just going through the chat here to see if there's so I guess a lot of guys at the moment, Steve's saying that his projectiles are made here, prices haven't changed in a couple of years. In fact, the dollar dropping could really support his business significantly, being locally sourced, locally made.
Correct. Yeah, that's absolutely what I was saying in terms of the manufacturing stuff. If your supply chain is insular or like domestic, where 80 to 100% of your inputs for making projectiles or whatever are locally sourced, then the American dollar situation is actually working in your favor, right?
Yeah.
Because if your biggest competitors are in the United States, well, suddenly their product is costing 50% more than it normally does, right? Which means that you can keep selling and theoretically sell at a larger volume for your existing prices, or even get away with jacking up your prices by like 25%. And obviously that increases your margin relatively. So, I mean, it's a good situation to be in if you do have a locally sourced supply chain.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Steve will. I hope he makes a very good product. It's a bit more of a premium product anyway,
Yeah.
but this may be the catalyst where it was a premium product and now it's a standard
Now it's
price.
on par with the other. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
and
Absolutely.
if he does, obviously he has to pass on any costs he gets accordingly.
Yep.
But if he can
But I mean,
do
if
that,
that were the case, or if I were in that, situation, I'd be stepping on the gas like fully, trying to move as much product while you've got the opportunity, right? Because you have, your competitors in the United States, their product costs 50% more now, right? And their supply chain is seriously constrained. Yeah, you've got a huge, like, clear runway for you to actually just step on the gas and go as hard as you can, and that's absolutely what I'd be doing in that situation.
yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and it makes a really good really good product. So it's a good opportunity for people to try this.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's a marketing exercise because people are going, oh, well, I usually buy, X,
Yep.
I might buy Y because it's kind of the same price now, might as well.
Yep.
And then it's like, well, once they try, they realize that it's a good product. Yeah. And that can actually get you some stickiness in terms of customers. So I think it's a good opportunity.
Absolutely, it may actually be worth our while to do a show about some of the Australian providers, some of the stuff that's sourced in house. Get some of the local guys on there because the guys in the chat are actually talking about some Australian brass manufacturers, some more projectile options for handguns and
get
other
them all
bits
on,
and pieces.
Rusty.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got some questions for you since I got you here.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I proclaimed pretty early on Twitter that, like, because everyone asked me for investment advice, right? I've dedicated my entire career to sort of like understanding and discovering money to get to the end of the line and realize that it's all just BS. It's imaginary, right? It's just made up numbers on spreadsheets.
Sure.
That is all it is, yeah? And the reason I know that is that everyone that's watching right now, just ask yourself, the government has spent $200 billion on surplus right now. Where did the money come from? Yeah. I'm not going to give you the answer. You go find the answer, and then you'll be as jaded as I am, right? So everyone hits me up for an investment advice, and I say the only assets worth like holding, right, are arable land for farming, yeah,
Yep.
storable food, yeah,
Yep.
and the guns and ammo to defend them. Right? Because one without the other, it's kind of pointless, right?
Yep.
Without the food, you can have all the ammo in the world, but you'll starve to death. Yeah. With all the food in the world and no ammo to defend it, well, you're going to lose it pretty quickly. Like, and that is my entire investment thesis, right? In all seriousness. Okay.
Yes.
I spent a lot of time at university to come to this conclusion, by the way.
I bet
my question is,
I bet that flew real well at uni, by the way. That sounds like
no. I finished uni and then I discovered it. None of my professors were talking about the food and ammunition investment thesis.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is, like, I've been looking more into this, and ammunition is a good investment grade asset, right?
Yeah, right.
The only problem with it, like food, is that it has an expiry date, right? So my understanding is that if you keep ammo for 20 years, that ammo ain't going to be good in 20 years. Is that a fair assessment?
I would completely disagree with that, and it would be entirely based on how you store that ammo. If you store that ammo in a position where it's dry and secure and such, that ammo is going to be good for a long time. A long time, yeah. The moisture is the enemy of ammunition, and that will be a problem. But if you keep it in the right conditions, and I'm welcome to be corrected in the chat if anyone's got any other thoughts. But you could stick ammo in good conditions and keep it for 100 years. It may not. Let me clarify.
It's good to know.
It may not. If you're into long range
shooting
or stuff like that,
I get that.
It may not shoot as well as it used to, or something along those lines. However, we were talking the other night about the idea that there can be this bonding that happens between projectiles and cases and stuff like that. And guys, debate seriously whether or not that could win or lose you a bench press competition. However, that is not at play in this scenario.
My other thought here is actually about keeping them separately, right? Well, if I look at brass as an investment asset, right, and I actually look at the powder as an investment asset, and I actually keep them separate until I get to a point that I need it, then I think long-term storage actually becomes like a more tenable proposition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you may run into some legal challenges.
Oh yeah, probably.
Because you are, look, I don't know about other states, but in SA you're only meant to have 12 months supply worth of ammo. But some people shoot through a lot in 12 months, so that could be a fairly big supply, and that could be a rolling supply, no doubt about that. But yeah, very very interesting. Here we go. So Steve Hurd again has jumped in and said the temperature and moisture are the critical issues, but 20 years, and Australia is known for producing powder that is very environmentally stable, and so because of that, 20 years will have very little effect on that. As I said, it may not be amazingly accurate, but it will be fine. Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll go bang.
And if anyone on the chat actually has this, I'm trying to get some data on, I guess, ammunition prices, particularly in America, because we've got such a huge sample size over there. Mm-hmm. Ammunition prices, almost like the stock market, right? Yep. Because I think it was Steve before who was saying that the price kind of ebbs and flows with US election cycles.
Yes.
That is because from everything I understand, the price of ammunition follows the same principles as the stock market, except that there's no kind of I'm having trouble getting data points on it, I just think it's a bit frustrating for me, just because I do have so much faith and confidence in it as an investment asset in and of itself.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. Yeah, most of the guys just look at it to shoot. But
absolutely. I guess I'm thinking of it as an investment grade asset, because I mean, the next time something like this or, something worse comes around, I want you to be calling me up and going Chris, how much have you got in your cache, right? And I'll be like, I've got heaps, but it will cost you.
It will cost you, yeah.
Maybe I need to add toilet paper to the portfolio after all of this.
I think, does toilet paper deteriorate over time? That's
I don't know. We need to get an expert on the show.
If anybody in the chat knows an expert in toilet paper or paper in general, interested in talking.
Honestly, I think toilet paper would store better than ammo. I think it would store better than ammo.
Probably the same factors, isn't it? Temperature and moisture is probably the
I don't think temperature would affect toilet paper. I think moisture 100% would.
Yeah.
And it could actually affect toilet paper more than ammo.
Yep.
But, I mean, interesting question to put out to the crowd there.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good. I'm still waiting for your answer on how we are going to pay for it all, by the way.
Oh, mate. Well, I mean, we're going to pay for it. Look, but I mean, I can guarantee you that it's going to be by way of additional income taxes, additional sales tax. There's talk of GST going up to 20%, income taxes going up. They're certainly not going to cut spending.
No.
Please. No. Then the other way everyone's going to pay for it is through inflation, right? Because if you just keep printing money, like there's no tomorrow, well, that has this inflationary effect where everything just costs more. And, you've got $1,000 in the bank today. If in 10 years' time that $1,000 has the purchasing power of $500, and this is a good way for your audience to think about this. Peg this in number of rounds, right? So how many rounds of ammo can you buy today? How many rounds of ammo with the same money will you be able to buy in 10 years' time, right? Because, ammunition and food and all of that sort of stuff, they're not even investment assets, they're inflation hedges, right? Because it makes more sense to buy it now, when the dollar is, I guess, worth more than in 10 years' time when the dollar is worth less because we've printed a billion more or 100, 200 billion more.
200 billion.
And there's more circulating around. The fundamentals of supply and demand don't switch off, whether it's currency or ammunition. The laws of gravity still apply. So how we're going to pay for it is through additional sales taxes, additional income taxes, and I guess inflation by default. And it's going to take a long time, and I think our kids and possibly our kids' kids are not going to look too fondly on us for the decisions that have been made in the last sort of 2 months.
Yeah, I agree. I saw some great memes around that about generational payments for this. So, guys, in the chat, we've got about 10 minutes or so left. So, if you have any further questions, please hit us up quickly. That would be excellent. I'm just scrolling through the chat to see if there is anything else that's come through. Again, a lot of talk about some of the local manufacturers and ways to support them and bits and pieces, and whether or not they would pursue the civilian market in terms of new cartridges and bits and pieces. A lot of these guys are set up. And makes a lot of sense if you think about it. A lot of these guys are set up to produce ammunition and such for the military, to be able to have that manufacturing in house.
Makes sense.
Which makes great sense, and they do like not overruns, but they pump out more so they can fulfill civilian markets as well. But a lot of civilian markets run different cartridges and calibers and stuff that the military
so you'd have to like retool your production lines and all of that sort of stuff to kind of like to satisfy. Look, I think it's worth investigating because I mean the thing is this could be a flash in the pan, So it's a big punt to kind of adapt your entire production to satisfy a civilian market. If in 6 months' time everything's just going to return to business as usual, right? Yeah. And this is, I guess, the gamble inherent in business, right? So in one respect, you could punt it and be all like, okay, cool. Business is not going to return to usual, right? Demand for American ammunition is just going to like plummet. The Australian dollar is going to remain consistently low. I'm going to start catering for civilian market, and that's going to cost me $100,000 to retool my production line to start making civilian grade munitions. Cool, done, committed that $100,000, and let's assume that punt was right. Then you're going to be the winner, right? If that punt is wrong, then you've sunk $100,000 to satisfy a civilian market that no longer wants your product in 6 months' time, right? Yep. That's going to hurt. Yep. Conversely, I guess it's like, well, you could take the punt that it's like, no, everything's going to return back to normal again in six months' time. I'm not going to retool my production line, and in 24 months' time, everything's still the same, right? And, the American supply chain's constrained, the American dollar's still high, and it's like, damn, I missed that opportunity, right? And I guess for all of those manufacturers that are actually on the line right now, like, that's something you got to roll the dice on yourself in terms of like, well, what do you think is going to happen? And there are going to be winners and losers out of this in terms of who makes those decisions.
Yeah, we've taken a bit of a punt with our club. Actually, we've lowered our membership fee to $1 rather than $120 plus an $80 joining fee. So, guys, at the moment, are signing up. We've signed up in the last 3 days. We've signed up 40 new members. So we've gone from about 140 members to about 180. So it's a big jump. And but the membership is limited, not for 12 months. It's limited to the end of 2020. So if we were able to shoot again in 3 months, these guys have got a sensational deal. They've got 6 months worth of membership for $1, and then hopefully, of course, our players, hopefully they'll enjoy themselves and come back.
They'll renew next year. Yeah, I mean that's the idea.
But they've taken a punt for $1 that we may start shooting again November. And they get a month out of it, and then they're busy that month because everything's come back and they can't make it. And, they've wasted it. I mean, $1's not that big a punt in the current climate, but I
was going to say, I feel like this is a one-sided bet, man. I don't think the buyers have got anything to lose here, really, except for $1.
Exactly right, and so I think.
But it's a great way to actually get people engaged with the club, so why not?
Yeah, and so we have, because we went as soon as basically when everything kicked in, we went from like. We're about 3 or 4 members a week we were having jump on board to 0 for weeks on end. And then, this idea got propped up and we've gone to 40 in 3 days.
Good.
Yeah, and again, as you said, hopefully a number of them continue on. Yeah. Everyone else who wasn't.
Most of them will, I think.
Yeah. I'd be thinking 80% or so. So, we'll see how we go. All right, just going to have one more little check in the chat to see if we've got any further questions on there. Lots of debates around ADI is the manufacturer they're talking about who produce brass ammo, Australian Defence Industries, and they're a small part of a very big international company. Defence do a lot to keep them alive. I don't think they'll do what they can in the domestic the civilian market, but I don't think it'll be massive. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they'll keep that going.
One thing I will say on the retooling punt is that I think the decision has been made a lot easier by some of the government concessions that have been handed out to businesses, particularly the instant asset write-off being like jacked up. That theoretically, if you do have to retool your production line and you have to get some new equipment, like that equipment is immediately a tax deduction. So I am seeing the businesses that are doing okay in the sense that their business as usual or their revenue has actually increased. Because that's the crazy thing. Like half of my clients, their revenue's actually gone up, not sideways or down, right?
Yep.
And in those circumstances, like buying equipment is a good investment, right? Especially if there's a tax sort of incentive to do so.
Yep.
So I think the decision is made a little easier if you can get a free carry for at least 30% of the risk from the federal government.
There is a question here, although I'm aware you're in accounting, not in law. But do you think we will see any businesses attempt to go down any sort of legal path against the government for shutting aspects or restricting anything?
I hope they do. I hope they do, right? And I think that part of the JobKeeper and all of this stimulus is to kind of like pay off or buy this massive amount of potential litigation that can actually come the federal government's way. I will tell you that it has a better chance of flying in the United States, where I guess people and corporations have got way more rights than they do in Australia. But there will be litigation. I'm 100% certain of that. There'll be worldwide litigation of this because, like, when you think about it, like, what right, in all seriousness, does the government have to say you can no longer conduct business? Right?
It feels so wrong, doesn't it?
It's mind-boggling, right?
Yeah.
And in Australia, it has every right because, I mean, we're subjects and, we're subjected to the will of the monarch, I guess. In America, they're sovereign citizens and they have way, way more rights, I guess, against the government or from the government.
Yeah.
To actually litigate things like this. And, I'm a keen follower of tax litigation on an international perspective.
Okay.
And it's so funny watching American tax law, like lawsuits, right? Because everyone has challenged income tax in America from every perspective, like First Amendment, it's a freedom of speech thing, basically arguing that to submit a tax return to the IRS is compelled speech, right? Which is a violation of First Amendment. So it's, all of these, constitutional rights that Americans have, they've argued every single, perspective of them. And there have been successful cases, more in America than there have been in Australia. So there will be litigation. I doubt you'll see much successful litigation in Australia, but you will see successful litigation in the United States. And there will probably be stuff that gets pushed up to the Supreme Court in the United States that will probably, I'm just punting here, will probably determine that the entire shutdown was unconstitutional in the United States and should have never have happened. Because this is unprecedented in terms of the state actually coming in and shutting down businesses by the hundreds of thousands. And, again, in America, like, that's going to be a problem for sure.
Yeah, I particularly remember sitting on the couch. This is back when I was sort of making decisions around PRS going ahead or not and stuff, and so I was pretty attuned to all the conference. I couldn't care less now. I'm just doing my thing. But I was watching Scott Morrison talk, and he talked about Tatua's shutting down. Immediately messaged a mate who is one, and said, like that, bang, gone. That's your livelihood.
Like in a press conference. That's how you find out.
Yeah.
That's how you find out that the government shut you down is in a press conference.
You find out by me messaging you saying, hey, are you okay? Like,
what are you talking about? I'm on the couch watching Netflix. What are you talking about?
Exactly. It's just, it's madness.
I've had hundreds of those phone calls in the last month, man. It's been insane.
I bet. One more question for you. I think this will be the last one we'll get to. And we'll broaden this out a little bit generally, but is it a bad time to buy a high-end scope? So taking let's say, a $4,000 purchase for something that, by chance is probably here in country, perhaps. So
Yep.
it's at an older price, about to hit by 15-20% price rise.
Yep.
But that's money out of your pocket right now. But you wanted to buy it anyway. Good, bad, what's your scenario?
So I've got two schools of thought, and I oscillate between this like every 4 hours. Ask my wife, right? Seriously, it's insane.
Yeah.
I go 3 times, 4 times during the day, going from cash is completely worthless. We just need to spend it as soon as it lands. Yeah, on food and all of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's better locked up in groceries than it is in cash, right? And for I guess all of your viewers who aren't sort of tuned into this, they need to Google the term bank run. Put simply, the banks don't have enough money for everyone.
Yep.
Okay. And if everyone decides to withdraw their money from the bank at the same time, then the banks collapse, right? And then nobody has any money, right? Because your money is only as valuable as your ability to transact with it. If the banks collapse, you can't transact with your money, thus your money is worthless, yeah? Mm-hmm. And that coincides with the fact that the government are printing more of it, increasing the supply of it, which means that obviously the money is worth less, right? So I oscillate from going like this cash is worthless. I need to convert it into food and so forth, or whatever I want. The means of production, malt liquor. I need to convert it into it into something. Yeah, sponsored by Glenlivet. I need to convert my money into something. That's going to be more useful than money, which isn't worth anything. In theory. 2, I need to hoard all of my money, so that I can save it for a rainy day because I may not have an income in 6 months' time, right? And I oscillate between that every 2 hours, right? Yeah. So I don't have a clear answer for that because I'm still like, I have no idea. So that's probably not an answer.
Yeah.
So I guess like you just kind of go with what feels right in terms of gut, If you've got a job, if you've got a secure income or whatever, and you've got the cash sitting around lazy, like, well, why not? Yeah. So I think how secure is your income? If your income's secure, then you're golden. Go spend as much money as you physically can, right? If you've just lost your job, you may want to think about groceries instead of a scope, simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, fair call, and I think there's plenty of guys who are in. I mean, they talk about the unemployment rates getting to 7 or 8 or 9% or something on those lines, or higher. But let's say 20%, right?
Yeah,
still 80% of guys who still have jobs and
absolutely that are still business as usual, man. And I speak to them on the daily.
And so it's useful for guys who for people to buy stuff. I mean, I'm staring down the barrel of so to speak. I'm hoping people could buy projectiles and scopes and stuff. But either way, I'm just going to be doing these and see where we go from there with doing these chats.
The other interesting thing to kind of point out on that sort of discretionary spending is that there are a lot of businesses that have been impacted by this, by all of this, that are actually doing some pretty crazy sales, man. Like my missus is has got this checklist of stuff she's buying in terms of like makeup and clothes and stuff like that, because these brands are trying to like get people to spend money, and they're good looking deals, man. Like she wants to buy like a new quilt or something. She showed me the price of it. I'm like, yeah, damn, that's like half price.
Buy 2.
Do it. Yeah, right. Assuming that she got me in the right mood.
Depending which 2-hour cycle you're on.
Mood, and then it's not happening. Look, I think there are good opportunities and good bargains, and I've got plenty of them in the last month.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess what we've learnt, Chris, is that the world is all sorts of topsy-turvy at the moment, and you have mood swings every 2 hours. Okay.
I do, but the only constant in life is arable land, storable food, and ammunition.
Right, so it should be our viewers.
You don't need much else, do you?
Our viewers should be, particularly if you can get the food off the arable land.
Even better, right?
Doing well. Awesome, man. Well, thank you very much for your time, man. It's great to see you. Great to have you on, and there has been quite a few guys in watching us. So, guys who were watching, hopefully this has been valuable, because I know this is not our normal subject matter for this show, but I suspect, seeing some of the questions that came through, some guys have concerns about what's going on in the world, and that's why
Totally.
great to have Chris come on board and actually be able to put some larger perspective on this, because this is the stuff he looks at day to day, and
Every day.
every single day, and not necessarily just in the gun industry, and can provide some perspective on that, but does have that interest in what we do as well, and so and has clients, including myself, who are in that industry, and so therefore has a vested interest to pay some attention to it. So it's awesome.
Yep.
Chris, thank you very much for your time, mate. Great to see you, and we'll no doubt stay safe, stay healthy down there, and we will catch up with you soon.
Talk to you soon, Rusty.
Cheers. Guys, thanks so much for being involved. Look forward to tomorrow's show. Ben hasn't told me who's on. Ben's got it all under control. I'm sure someone's on board. But it will be awesome. Thanks, guys, for being involved. Hopefully, you got a lot out of this. Hit us up with any further questions and pass the word out. We'll drop some clips and bits and pieces out from this show and other shows as we normally do. Again, don't forget 5% off. Keep me in business. 5% off at Projectile Warehouse. Use the code ID Live, ID LIVE with the number 5 tacked on the end, ID Live 5, and we are moving projectiles out the door on a daily basis. It's obviously not over Easter, but anyway, we're keeping on going. New website coming for Scoped Out sometime soon as well. I want to let you guys know all of that, and we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks very much, and enjoy your day, enjoy your week. Hopefully everything is back to normal for you. Cheers.
Hey, pretty baby. Find out what you feel.